Hello, good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here in our webinar series. This time to talk about Q1 results. I am, as you know, probably some of you know, I am Felipe Munoz. I am the PR manager and industry expert at JATO. And today I'll be talking to you about what happened in Q1 2022 following the supply chain disruptions, the issues with Ukraine, and many other things that are challenging the industry nowadays. So a bit of my background. In the past, I worked as a head of market analysis in the biotech industry. Then I moved to the automotive industry, which is my biggest passion, from 2013 in FCA, where I worked in digital marketing, but also in Alfa Romeo from 2014. I also started collaborating with many specialized media around Europe and created my own channels where I have more than 130,000 followers and growing. And currently, in JATO as a PR manager, so dealing with all media inquiries, analysis and reports, and finally as an industry expert at JATO Dynamics. What are we going to talk about today? So first of all, we're gonna understand the trends and the current situation, what has happened over the last 7 years, and what's the point of the situation today. The industry, as I said, is facing unprecedented challenges. So everything is changing, and the OEMs are adapting to this new reality. Then we'll have a look, we'll have a detail by country, by fuel type, segment, and OEM. It's important to see who is really winning or losing from this situation, where growth is still happening, and what's the point of what's the situation of electric vehicles. Then I'll show you an interesting slide about the correlation between profitability and sales. I don't know if you noticed, but last year, despite the problems, many OEMs posted record profits, even if they sold fewer cars. Is it still the case? We'll see later. And finally, I'll show you an interesting chart with the results of the top 10 best-selling cars in Q1 in the world, and you'll see big surprises over there. So let's start. Let's start. Before it's important to tell that to consider that when we talk about the global, we are including 53 markets around the world, which is more or less 94% of the world's total. And by vehicles, light vehicles, we include cars, MPVs or minivans, SUVs and sport cars, and pickups and light commercial vehicles. We are excluding here the heavy industrial vehicles because it's part of another industry. So in Q1, what happened in Q1 regarding global sales over the last 7 years? As you can see here, the industry is still having problems. We are talking of around 17 million vehicles sold in Q1 2022, which is 16% less than what we had before the pandemic, but it's 8% more than what we had during the worst of the pandemic. So basically, the industry is not as bad in terms of volume. It's not as bad as when 2 years ago, but it's still far from the pre-pandemic levels. And actually, it's interesting to see the effect of the pandemic and the chip shortage. I mean, the industry has lost more or less 1.25 million cars sold between the pre-pandemic and the post-pandemic. So it means between 2019 and 2021, when the pandemic was not over, but the worst was over. But if you compare the post-pandemic scenario, so I mean 2021 with 2022, the industry is losing even more. It's losing more than 2 million units. So it means that even if we are done with the worst of the pandemic, the chip shortage is having a worse effect on the industry than the pandemic itself. Because the big change, there is a big loss between 2021 and 2022, which was even worse than the loss between 2019 and 2021, I'm sorry. So the industry, we thought the pandemic was the worst, but it wasn't. And the chip shortage, along with many geopolitical tensions today, are affecting even more the industry, as we will see now in the detail by countries. For example, we see double-digit drops in many key markets, including the United States, including many of the big European markets, and including China. And that's the most challenging part of the story, because so far during the pandemic, China drove growth. China didn't make things. The growth in China during the pandemic allowed to somehow offset the big losses from the West. Today, we are not seeing this. China is facing big problems, also because of the recent lockdowns. The sales are dropping in China because many big cities are still until strict lockdown. So the demand is once again being affected by the pandemic. It is not the case in the rest of the world. The rest of the world is having issues, mostly because of the lack of new cars available in the dealerships, and also, of course, because of lack of components coming from Ukraine or coming from markets that are directly or indirectly affected by the conflict, the war in Ukraine. The US is, as I said, is posting a 16% drop. You can see here also Brazil down by 29%, 25%, while Chile in South America is almost at the same level of Argentina. I mean, Chile is a very dynamic market, which is so far not affected by the crisis. However, some of the green numbers you see here, some of the markets that are growing, are usually taking a bit longer to enter the crisis. I mean, when the pandemic started, we saw some of these markets still growing because the crisis had not arrived yet. So it could be also the case this time. You see markets like Russia minus 29%. This is, I mean, once again, Q1. The situation has worsened even more after April. So we expect actually a Q2 2022 even worse than Q1. The Southeast Asian economy markets are still, some of them are still doing quite well. So there is still growth happening, but the general opinion is that the market, the automotive industry, is going to have a very bad year in 2022. What happened to the fuel type? Here is interesting to see how what's the evolution between before the pandemic and after the pandemic and during the chip shortage, how the industry is moving. So in 2029, only 2.1% of the global light vehicle sales were electric or plug-in hybrid. This has growth by 10 points, and today these cars are more popular than diesel cars, while they continue to take market share away from the petrol cars as well. However, the petrol is still the big thing in many markets. I mean, in most of the markets, yes, in all markets, especially in the US and the developing countries. Just to give you an idea, in 2019, there were in Q1 2019, 345,000 electric and plug-in hybrid cars were sold. This year, through March, we've seen more than 1.5 million units. So this is growing very fast, but the lack of units available, the lack of components to build cars is already affecting this market too, because it wasn't the case last year. We saw that the priority of many OEMs was to use the very few ships to build electric cars. So there was like a kind of availability of these cars in the dealerships, but the crisis is getting worse, and even the EVs are not being are being affected by this. Anyway, you can see here a big increase. Gasoline cars, for example, or petrol cars, the demand is falling from 12.6 million units in Q1 2019 to 9.2 million this year. And diesel cars, mostly sold in Europe, fell from 2.6 million to 1.5 million. So this is a big change in the industry, as you can see. The situation by segment is pretty much interesting as well. As you can see, as you probably of you know, SUVs are the leading segment in the world, but they continue to gain share at the expense, at this time, at the expense of sedans. 43% of the global light vehicle sales were SUVs, against 19% sedan and 17% hatchbacks. Hatchbacks, they were able to keep their market share because they are still a big thing in Europe and some developing markets. However, sedans, for example, they continue to face challenges in North America due to the SUV popularity. Pickup trucks are also gaining traction. They are very popular in North America, but also in many markets in Southeast Asia, Latin America, and Africa. And as you can see here, the wagons, station wagons, they keep losing traction, as well as MPVs, and while sport cars continue to be a minor player. What happened by OEM? So in Q1 2022, Toyota Group still led the global market with almost 14% market share, and actually was one of the big winners during the quarter because it was able to increase its market share by more than 0.7 points. Then it was followed by Volkswagen Group, which is in a different situation. Volkswagen Group lost 1.7 points of market share, of global market share, following issues in Europe and following the continuous lockdown in China. Volkswagen Group is highly exposed to the Chinese market. It's the leader there, and it's also a leader in Europe, where the Ukraine crisis and the lack of new cars available is affecting the demand. Hyundai and Kia, the Koreans, are doing also very well. They are gaining traction, they are gaining more share, and this is mostly because of their electric cars offensive and their strong position in many markets. I mean, they are strong in China and South Korea, North America, Latin America, and Europe. Among the biggest winners during the Q1, during the first quarter of this year, were the Chinese OEMs, excluding, of course, Geely, that is placed as an independent one in this analysis. The Chinese OEMs are expanding their business outside China. Of course, they are exposed to the lockdowns and the crisis in China, but they are having a very good performance in markets like South America, the Middle East, Africa, or Southeast Asia. And they are finally, it seems that they are finally having a decent market share in those markets, thanks to the increasing competitiveness of their cars, but also because they are finally proposing affordable electric cars for the masses. It has been the case in China for some years already, but we are finally seeing these electric cars arriving abroad, and this is helping us to increase their market share faster than what the Western brands are doing. The missing question here is, when is this going to happen in Europe or the US? And this will depend on the regulation and how these two markets deal with the increasing pressure from China. Then, of course, is Tesla. Tesla has gained almost 0.8 points of share over the last year. It's the big protagonist because both the Model 3 and Model Y are selling very well in all the countries where they have been presented. And Tesla is now by far the biggest EV maker and doesn't stop growing. I mean, the crisis, of course, as Elon Musk said some weeks ago, the crisis, there is also, it's not the Tesla's problem is not demand, but production. Of course, for them, it's also difficult to meet the demand under the current situation regarding the components and semiconductors. But wherever Tesla arrives and opens a dealership, there is a strong demand for its cars, which is not the case for all OEMs in this list, for example. In the opposite side, we see, as I said, Volkswagen Group losing share, General Motors and SAIC Wood in its joint venture in China also losing market share, mostly because of issues in China. Renault, Nissan, Mitsubishi is losing 0.8 points of share, following problems in Europe, Renault, and Russia. It's strongly exposed to the Russian market. And Stellantis and Ford also losing share. Hyundai and Kia is one of the winners, as I said, and as well some Indian makers are increasing their share thanks to the dynamic situation in India. This is an interesting chart I brought to you, because until last year we heard that, and we saw from the financial statements, that the majority of OEMs were able to make more money even if they sold fewer cars. But is it still the case? Well, in Q1 2022, yes, it was not the case for quite a lot. We saw how Ford, General Motors, Suzuki, Toyota, they posted losses while they also sold fewer cars. While other companies like BMW Group, Kia, Hyundai, Mercedes, Tesla, or Volkswagen, they continue to make more money even if they sold fewer cars. The Tesla case, for example, is particularly interesting. They are increasing their profits by more than 500% during Q1, but also the sales, but by more than 60%. Volkswagen is also a big winner in terms of profits, as well as the Koreans. So the situation is changing. We are seeing that many OEMs are still making use of this crisis to reposition their products, to improve their product mix, and increase prices. And if the demand is there, which is not an issue right now, they can increase the prices, and this is going to have a positive impact on their profits. However, not all car makers can increase their prices. Many car makers are exposed to developing markets where the consumer is more high sensitive to the price increases. Finally, the big thing for Q1 is to see two Teslas in the top 10, the global top 10. The Tesla Model Y was the 5th best-selling car during Q1, while outselling the Model 3, which is now occupying the 8th position. In 2021 full year, the Tesla Model 3 was the 9th best-selling car, so it was the first time an electric car hits the global top 10, while the Tesla Model Y was the 19th best-selling vehicle. Today, the situation has improved for these two cars, and we are finally seeing what Elon Musk said some years ago, that these cars would become the most popular in the world. I'm not sure if the Model Y will hit the first place this year. It's very hard to compete against the strong popularity of Toyota RAV4, which is present everywhere in the world, or the Toyota Corolla. But it could certainly hit the 4th position by the end of this year. Anyway, as I said, the Toyota is still ahead thanks to the RAV4 and Corolla, which are available everywhere in the world. The RAV4 has a strong presence in North America, China, and many other middle markets, as well as the Corolla. So, and you see here, for example, that there are 5 SUVs in the top 10, 4 sedans or cars, and 1 pickup truck, which is the Toyota Hilux, which is outselling the big Ford F-150. So this is just to give you an idea of what's going on. Q1 2022 is giving us a lot of challenges, but it's also giving us a lot of surprises, big surprises, as you can see here. I mean, the industry has never seen an electric car in the 5th position of the global ranking. So the industry is certainly changing. Tesla is making part of that change, and the traditional makers are doing what they can to adapt to the new situation, keep earning more money, and despite dealing with smaller markets in terms of volume. That's it. I hope you liked the presentation. I'll be happy to get some questions from you. So let's start with one of the first questions. Raul Perez is asking, when is predicted to finish semiconductors shortage? According to the experts, we should continue seeing this crisis through the whole year, and we are expected to see the light at the end of the tunnel by early 2023. Hopefully, no. When automotive market will be recover and return to pre-pandemic sales, it's not clear if the market will return to pre-pandemic sales, because the volumes we saw before the pandemic corresponded to a reality that doesn't exist anymore. Today, the ownership of cars is not the same we had before 2019. Today, owning a car is not a must for many people, and sharing is becoming a big thing. People are keeping their cars for longer. So, and while the EVs are gaining traction, even if they are more expensive, so we don't expect big volumes, at least in the coming years. It would be good to see a comparison of the number of countries by market size, what Tesla is sold versus. Okay, Aman, thanks for the suggestion. Then we have a question from Daniel Vargas: how the freight transport affects the recovery of the industry. Well, it all depends on the industry is mostly dealing. The biggest thing the industry is dealing with is the lack of components, lack of car parts. The way the cars get transported is the second thing. They must deal with it. But if we do not deal with the availability of cars, then we won't be able to deal with any other issues. On the slide number 9, the 6% correspond to other body types, mostly light commercial vehicles. Which markets helped Tesla to achieve 2 models in the top 10 of the most selling cars in Q1? The US and Europe, because China, well, of course China as well, but the Chinese growth has been affected by the lockdown, as I said. What could be the effect to passenger vehicles industry on Russia-Ukraine conflict? Some percentage. Look, the Russian-Ukraine conflict can be seen in 2 ways. First of all, Russia is a big market. Yes, it's among the top 10, or it was among the top 10. But it's a very closed market, so it doesn't really import a lot of cars, and it doesn't really export a lot of cars. So most of the local production is being sold locally or to the ex-Soviet republics like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Belarus. So in terms of integration, Russia is not really a big thing and would not affect a lot in terms of volume, unless you are there and you have a lot of production sites, which is the case of Renault Group, or which is the case of Toyota or Hyundai. However, when you look at the number of sales coming from Russia at those OEMs, is not a big thing either. The problem with Russia-Ukraine conflict is the effect on the lack of components. Ukraine, for example, it produces some specific parts for the production of cars in Europe. If there is a conflict in Ukraine, these parts won't be available. So this will have an effect. Thanks, it was very interesting. Thanks. Okay, so I think we are done on time. Thanks for your questions. We'll be sharing this information through our channels and hope to see you soon. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.